In 2023, I read 160 books. These are the 10 best. Hey guys, welcome to another video. I hope you're all doing well today. Happy New Year. It's 2024. I cannot believe it. Don't know where 2023 went. We're not going to talk about that though. It's going to be a great year. I can feel it. That being said, before we jump into all the fun of 2024, we've got to talk about my favorite books of 2023. If you missed it, I did put out my honorable mentions last week talking about my numbers 20 through 11 of my favorite books of the year, and now I'm here to discuss my top 10. I will say I have absolutely no confidence in the ranking of this list. These are my 10 favorite books, but even in the days since I made this list and I've been planning on filming it, I've gone back and forth, and so I'm just gonna tell you this top 10, and they're all amazing. I don't have like a specific book of the year this year either. Last year I had 2 books that were like all-time favorite books. I don't know that any specific book that I read this year is like on my 10 favorite books of all time. That being said, I thoroughly enjoyed all 10 of these books so much. They get my full stamp of approval, and we've got a lot of different genres today. I've got sci-fi, fantasy, horror, literary fiction, a classic, a mystery thriller. There's something for everybody in this list. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video. Let me know what your absolute favorite book of 2023 was so I can go read it and tell you how much I loved it too. Cannot wait to hear from you guys. And yeah, without any further ado, let's jump into my top 10. First up is probably my favorite series that I continued in 2023, and that is the Rising Saga. I read Iron Gold, Dark Age, and Lightbringer in 2023 after having not touched the Rising series in years. I binged the first 3 Rising books in 2020 and I loved them so much. I gave all 3 of them 5 stars, but I loved the ending of book 3 so much that I was not ready to get rid of that ending and continue on with the series. I feel like a lot of people do that. They read the first 3 books that were originally intended as a trilogy and then they stop there. Well, I'm here to tell you, don't do what I did, because the 4th, 5th, and 6th books of the series were amazing. I gave all 3 of those books 5 stars as well. This may be my favorite series of all time because I have adored every single one of the 6 books that has come out. And if Pierce Brown somehow nails the landing with the final book, book 7, Red God, when it comes out, I mean, this is top tier. This is top tier. I have to say, I love what Pierce Brown did with books 4, 5, and 6 of the Rising series, because he took the amazing things about book 1, the world building, the character arcs, the consequences of actions, and the heavy themes of war and sacrifice, and the roles we play in our lives and how they can be sometimes conflicting. He takes those things, and in books 4, 5, and 6, he just expounds upon them by adding different perspectives, because in the first 3 books we just get Darrow's perspective. It's first person, it's just him, and in books 4, 5, and 6 we get multiple POVs, and he does that masterfully. I really enjoyed all 3 of these books. If I had to say which one was my favorite of the 3, I would probably say Dark Age, but it's between Dark Age and Lightbringer. I really enjoyed Iron Gold as well, but that was definitely more of like setting up where the series was going. Dark Age was just like in the pits, man. That was just intense. And Lightbringer had some absolutely amazing moments as well. So yeah, I don't know. They're all 3 amazing. I love what Pierce Brown is doing with the series, and I cannot wait for Red God to be out. Oh my gosh, if you have not read Rising yet, or if you've read the first book and it wasn't really for you, please, dear God, continue with the series, because it is so worth it. Amazing books. Next up, we have what is maybe my favorite horror book of 2023. There's one other on this list that could be a contender as well, but the book I'm talking about is Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. Oh my gosh, this book is insane and so good. Oh, it's incredible. I have so many positive things to say about this book. Nat Cassidy does such an incredible job of developing an atmosphere from page 1. Like, as soon as I started reading this book, I was immersed. I could feel it. I could feel the setting. I could feel the dread that these characters start to feel, and the tension just continues to rise until the end. And this book it blew my mind. I was so sucked in, perhaps the most sucked into a book I have been all year. Let me tell you what this book is about though. In this novel, we follow a young couple named Anna and Reed and their young newborn daughter, as well as they move into a new apartment that they won a lottery for in New York, in this amazing historical building that is also a little bit off. On top of all that, though, they have some real complications in their life because they did just have their newborn baby, but due to some complications in the birth, Anna is now wheelchair bound. So this is putting a lot of stress on her. It's putting a lot of stress on her marriage, as well as on the two adults kind of stepping into their new roles as parents. Things are very confusing for them, and Anna has a lot of struggles that she faces as she really tries to identify like how she can feel empowered in this new state of living that she is in. And all those things kind of set up the tone of the book, but as they enter into this apartment that they've gotten, like I said, there's just this growing sense of dread the whole time, and it is wild. There is some gnarly stuff that happens in this book. I loved it so much. Some of the most fun, some of the most unsettling bits of reading I've had all year, but man, if you have a strong stomach, pick up Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. It is absolutely incredible. It's been described as Salem's Lot meets Rosemary's Baby, and that is a very good description of what you're going to find in this book. But on top of that, there are some really amazing themes that I absolutely loved, and some really jaw-dropping moments as well. Such an incredible horror novel. Go pick this up right now. Next, we have a literary fiction novel that was on my mid-year check-in, and that book is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book, oh, it's so beautiful, and it has stuck with me so profoundly in the months since I finished it. This book follows a butler named Stevens as he's coming into like the end of an era. This era of butlers and these great houses and all of that is what he's been used to his whole life, but as he's entering into the later years of his life, that time is really coming to a close, and there are less houses that have these like great staffs, and you know, there's just less need for him in his vocation, and so he really struggles with his purpose and what he's going to do now with the rest of his life. He is still a butler, but things have changed so much that he spends this book really reflecting on his life, his purpose, his desires, his sacrifices that he's made to answer the call of duty that is, you know, comes along with his job. And it's just so good. It's so beautiful. It's so moving. It's like the most bittersweet book I've ever read in some ways, because there's not a whole lot of like tragedy that takes place in this book, but it reminds me of that quote that most men lead lives of quiet desperation, and I can just feel Stevens' quiet desperation throughout the whole book. But it's not just quiet, it's like silent desperation, but you still feel it. And that is like the best way I can sell this book, is there's so much subtext going on here, so much that we have to infer about Stevens' thoughts and feelings, because he doesn't just come out and say it, but you feel it anyway. And Kazuo Ishiguro does such an incredible job with that. Please read this book if you have not already. It's a great place to start with this author's works as well. I've read 3 works by him now, I believe, and this is probably my favorite and also the best place, in my opinion, so far to start with his books. So accessible and really amazing. Next, I want to talk about the latest addition to this list. And like I said in my honorable mentions video, this one was literally like one of the last books I read. I had my top 10 solidly done, and then I read this book in like the last couple weeks of December, and it just skyrocketed to the top of my list. The book that I'm talking about is Hearts in Atlantis by Stephen King. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. I feel like it's a book that not a lot of people talk about when it comes to Stephen King's like best books. And I understand why, because I wouldn't say that it's for everyone, and it is very, very different than most things that Stephen King writes and is known for. That being said, I adored this so much. Oh my gosh, I just like, I loved it from the beginning, and I kept waiting for my love for it to decline, and it didn't. So let me tell you a little bit of what this is about. So this is a series of stories. It's really like 2 novellas and I think 3 short stories. And they're all intertwined, and they're set around this generation that is growing up in the 60s. And it all really revolves around growing up in that time, and also like the impact of the war in Vietnam on this generation. Not only in like a direct way of like people who fought in the war, but on just society at that time as well, and what it was like to live during that time and after that time. And it is some of the best historical fiction that I think Stephen King has ever written, and he does such an incredible job of capturing like the feeling of this generation, especially in relation to this war. One of my favorite things, and I'll just kind of tell you about it a little bit, that it kind of opened my eyes to in this was like the whole impact of like the draft. There are moments in the story that take place like in college settings and with college age characters, and there was like this kind of consistent underlying fear that they had that if they for some reason could not continue going to college, like their grades dropped too low, or they had to drop out for financial reasons or what have you, that they would be sent off to die in this war. And that's not something that you really think about. Like, you think about the people who actually fought in the war, but then there's also this, like, the shadow of this war on this generation, and you feel that, like, throughout so much of this book. But on top of that, this book is so many different things. Each story captures a different kind of emotion, a different kind of experience. You start off with a young boy who's growing up in the 60s, and he deals with having a single mother who also faces a lot of abuse, and just kind of his life shattering as a result of some of the things that happened to him throughout this book and happened to the people around him. And then you follow different characters at different points in their life. You've got, like I said, the young boy, the college student, the war veteran, the old man. You just kind of travel throughout different stages of people's lives from this generation, and it is so eye-opening, it is so powerful, it is so good. I cannot tell you how much I love this book. And then on top of that, the first story in this book, Low Men in Yellow Coats, has some amazing ties to the Dark Tower. And that's the other thing why maybe people don't love this as much, who have maybe not read a lot of Stephen King, is yes, I think you can enjoy this book on its own without having the context of the Dark Tower, but there are some serious ties and implications to the Dark Tower in the first book. So for me, who's in the middle of my Dark Tower journey and love Stephen King, this was just like the ultimate surprise for me, and I adored this. This is now in my top 10 Stephen King books of all time. Hearts in Atlantis, incredible. I'm so glad that I read it this year. My favorite Stephen King book of the year, and definitely one of my top 10 reads of 2023. Next up, we have a fantasy series that I'm so excited to talk to you guys about today. I read 11 books in this series this year, 11, and it felt like I had read like so little of it because they were so addicting, so easy to get into, so compelling. I just had to keep going more and more and more. And the series I'm talking about is the Cradle series by Will White. My favorite book in this series is probably Bloodlines, which I believe is book 9. It's like the 8, 9, 10 range. Those three were just like peak Cradle, but I love this series, you guys. It is so addicting, and I cannot press on you enough how much fun I had reading these books. One, I had fun just because the books themselves are just so action-packed, and there's some lovable characters, and you just get this thrill every time you read another book and you see these characters growing and developing and advancing. That is so much fun. But on top of that, I buddy read these with my brothers, and I cannot recommend to you enough buddy reading these with people, because it's I think I've described it as like that feeling. I don't know if this is, I mean, it's not exclusive to me, but maybe you'll get this feeling and maybe you won't. But the feeling of like going to like a midnight premiere of the latest Marvel movie, like not nowadays, but back in like mid 2010s to early 2010s, that feeling of just like the next movie and like these oh my gosh moments that just felt so cool, and getting to share that with people. That's what it felt like reading this series with people. I love these books so much. They are progression fantasy, so you have this character who is very, very much an underdog. His name is Lyndon, and he is not expected at the very beginning to amount to much of anything. He's expected to be weak his whole life, to have to rely on other people his whole life, but through some serious changes in circumstances, he's kind of thrust into having to become strong. And the series just follows him growing stronger and stronger to face this great threat that is being imposed upon everything he cares about. And it's so fun. It's so fun. If you want something that is just like the most engaging and light and just exciting books to read, go read Cradle. It's popcorn. I adore it. Amazing. Earlier I said that Nestlings might be my favorite horror read of 2023. The other one that might be my favorite is The Reformatory by Tanana Reeve-Dew. Oh my gosh, this book took me by surprise. Crazy enough, I had never heard of this author until like late in this year when I heard about this book. She has like quite a few books that she's written, and they're very well received, and some of them are pretty popular as well, but I hadn't heard of her. And so when I saw that this was getting really good reviews, I went ahead and ordered it from Aardvark, and I'm so glad that I did, because this book was stunning, horrifying, compelling. It's like probably 600 pages. Is it? It's close to 600 pages. It's like in the 570 range, but I zoomed through this book. This is some of the most well-paced, hard to put down horror that I've ever read, and one of the easiest to get into and easiest to move through chunky books that I've ever read as well. If you're looking for an epic horror story that is just going to sweep you away and terrify you and just chill you to the bone, but is really immersive and easy to get into, the Reformatory is perfect. So in this book, we follow a young boy and his sister as well, as they are put into this difficult situation where their mother has just died. Their father is nowhere to be seen because he is on the run because of some crimes that he was really kind of wrongfully convicted for. And now, on top of that, the young boy, who I think is like 11 or 12, he's forced to go to this reformatory after trying to defend his sister's honor. And this reformatory is like a school for boys, but it's basically a prison. And it is just like truly horrifying, the things that this boy has to endure at this reformatory. The whole time his sister is trying desperately to get him out because he did not deserve to go to this place. He did not deserve any punishment whatsoever, but on top of that, she knows that he's being sent here possibly to die. And so she's doing everything she can to get him out. But not only is he in this difficult situation, but he starts seeing ghosts at this place, and things take some really dark turns, and this book was so stunning. It is a powerful book. It is such a scary book because not only like the ghost thing, that's really not even the scary part. And I think that is such an incredible thing the author did. Like, she included this supernatural aspect, but that's not really the horrifying part of this book. The horrifying part of this book is the stuff that people of color in this time had to endure. And boys in this reformatory, they're so young and they have to endure this cruelty, this horrible stuff, and it really happened. Like, stuff like this actually happened. Another book that this is kind of comparable to that I've read is The Nickel Boys by Colin Whitehead, I believe is his name. It's kind of a similar situation to that, but with a supernatural element, and it is absolutely stunning. So yeah, this is set, I believe, in like the 1960s-ish. Maybe it's a little bit earlier than that. I can't quite remember what time specifically, but it's in the mid-1900s. And that was the other thing when I was reading this book, is just that wasn't that long ago. And so reading about the racism, the horrible things that were done to people of color during this time, like, it's just so heartbreaking and so terrifying that this world is not that far off from the world we're in now. So this is a really powerful book. It is hard to read at times, but I highly recommend this book. It's great for people who have not read a whole lot of horror, in my opinion. I think it's a great place to start for the genre. And yeah, incredible book. Highly recommend this. Next book I want to talk to you about is one that inflicted a whole lot of emotional damage on me. And that's saying something considering everything else I read this year. That book is A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mystery. So this is a book I really picked up on a whim. I didn't know a whole lot about it other than the fact that it was sad. And when I bought this book, I really wanted a sad book, and it was just kind of peering at me from the shelves, and one day I just really wanted to read something physical in my hands, and so I picked it up, and yeah, I read it. And I don't regret it, but my heart does a little bit, because this book was ruthless, man. It was just cruel. Just to tell you a little bit of what this book is about, we follow 4 characters in the year 1975, I believe, in India. It's an unnamed city in India, and it's when there's been a state of emergency that has been announced in India. Like I said, we do follow 4 characters in this book, and they all come from different backgrounds, different cultures somewhat, and different experiences, and all of them through a series of events are forced to live in this really small place together and come together to just survive in the difficulty of this state of emergency. All of them have a lot of baggage that they carry with them from their experiences, and how this story is told is we're kind of introduced to all 4 of them very quickly, and we know that their circumstances are kind of coming about, that they're all going to be in the same place together, and then we go back and find out about the backstory of one person, and then of 2 other people, and then of 1 other person, and then finally, after getting all those backstories, like halfway through the book, we come back to the point where they are together in the present day, and then it goes from there. And yeah, I am really sad all the time when I think about this book. The best way that I can describe like my feelings for this book is by telling you about the name of the book, A Fine Balance. It comes from a section of the book where someone's talking about how there's a fine balance between hope and despair. And that fine balance is on display throughout this entire book. And it's something that really reminds you of the fragility of that balance, because there are moments when like your heart is soaring and then next your heart is crushed, and it fluctuates back and forth so frequently that it really is just revealed to be such a fine and fragile balance. And I recommend this book, but like with a grain of salt, because there are so many hardships that these characters face. And I finished this book feeling a little hollow. I won't lie to you. So it is a beautiful book. It's an important book. It told me a lot about some suffering that the people of India faced in the 70s that I had no idea about, and I would love to read more up on, but at the same time, like my heart is so heavy when I think about some of the things that happen in this book. So if you can handle a really powerful and important historical fiction book with some really beautifully handled character relationships and character development, but with some really heartbreaking moments as well, I highly recommend this book. It is stunning, it is important, it is powerful. It might be the best book that I read in 2023. I did have this book at the top of my list originally before I kind of threw that out the window. I did want to say that it was my favorite, but I did just finish this a couple weeks ago, so I don't know if it's recency bias that I'm putting it at the top, but ask me again in 6 months, this might be my favorite book of 2023. Next up, I did want to talk about The Running Grave, which is the 7th book in the Cormoran Strike series by Robert Galbraith. If you know me, you know I love this series because I'm a sucker for detective stories, for one. I'm a sucker for great character relationships and like buddy cops, like a duo of characters that just have such a great friendship on the page, and Robin and Strike absolutely have that in this series. And on top of that, I'm just a sucker for these books. Like, I really am. Above all of other mystery detective series, this is my favorite. I love the Cormoran Strike series so much, and The Running Grave book 7 is probably my favorite one. I don't know, like I think it is. I have to reread it because I've read all of the other books twice, and I need to read The Running Grave again probably like as soon as book 8 is announced, but I think this one was my favorite. This is just an incredible detective series following 2 private investigators, Cormoran Strike and Robin Ellicott, as they face kind of like the mystery of the week in each of these books. These are huge novels, like 900-ish pages each after like book 4, and like I said, this is book 7, so I'm not going to talk about any plot details, but I did just want to say this is one of my favorite series of all time. This was one of my favorite books of the year, and I am dying for book 8. Like, if you read book 7, you know I need book 8 right now. All right, last 2 books, and these 2 are probably in my top 5 of the year as well. If I had to narrow down like maybe my top 5, I'd probably say A Fine Balance, the Red Rising series, maybe The Remains of the Day, and then these 2 books, if I had to say. But I'm not 100% sure on that, so don't quote me on it. That being said, let's jump into the last 2 books I wanted to talk to you about. The first of those is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I have the physical copy of this book, but I don't recommend reading it physically because the audiobook for Project Hail Mary is probably the best audiobook I've ever listened to, and I've listened to probably 500 audiobooks in my life, and the one for this one is the best. The best. I can't tell you why, because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but just trust me, go get the audiobook for this right now. This is an incredible story that follows a character who wakes up on a spaceship, having no memory of how he got there or what is going on, but he knows he's the only person alive on this spaceship, and he soon discovers that things are not looking great for Earth, and he might be on a mission to save the planet. This book is incredible. Not only do you have some of the best moments of character stuff that I've read all year and that I've read in science fiction and in general, but on top of that, there's a great mystery here because Ryland, the main character, has no idea what's going on at the beginning, and as he slowly starts to piece it all together, so do we, and there's some great reveals in here, some great like suspense when you're just like on the edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen to him, what's going to happen to Earth, and just, this book is incredible. I loved The Martian by this author, but this is like 2 times as good. This is incredible, so good, one of my favorite science fiction books of all time. Please go read this right now, you will not regret it. It's so amazing, so amazing. And the final book on my top 10 of 2023 is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. What an incredible book. I have wanted to read this book for years. It is one of the most important books ever written. It is the most tested on book on the SATs, and I told myself throughout high school, man, I gotta read that to study for the SAT. Did I? No. Should I have? Yes. Not because of the SATs, but because I wasted so much time having not read Jane Eyre, which is an incredible book. I love this novel so much. You have an incredible protagonist with Jane Eyre, a really interesting, I'll say interesting, he's wild, male character in Mr. Rochester, and just some of the most engaging writing in a classic I have ever read. This book is so easy to get into, so easy to read, and like I said, Jane is just an incredible character. She is someone who I was constantly impressed by as I was reading this book. She would just do things that were so bold and so just, yes, I don't know how to say it other than that. She's a great character, and she doesn't back down from doing what is right. She doesn't back down from saying what is on her heart, and she's just very strong. I think she's amazing. I think she's an amazing character. I think this is an amazing book. If you want to read classics in 2024, pick up Jane Eyre. It is an easy one to get into, and I can almost guarantee you'll love it because it's incredible. But that is it. We have now made it through my top 10 of 2024. Like I said, this list is just all over the place, and that's how I feel about these books. Like, I love them all so much, and it's just like a juggle of which one lands in my hand, which one I would say is my favorite on a day. So yeah, please read some of these books and tell me when you love them. Not if you love them, but when you love them, because I give all of these books my full stamp of approval. They're all incredible, and I love them. This was a great year for reading. I read the most books that I've ever read in a year, and I read some truly incredible ones. I have to say, I enjoyed most of what I read in 2023. That's why I'm not really making like a most disappointing books of 2023, because there were a few in there that I didn't really enjoy, but overall, I had a blast with my reading year, and I cannot wait to see what new favorites I discover in 2024. Thank you so much for watching. Please stick around, subscribe if you haven't already, because I have a lot of exciting new content coming in 2024, and I am so pumped to share it with all of you. Thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.